Everyone said the Langston sisters were holding on to a lost cause. 3 women, 1 dying ranch, and no men left to fight for it. But Cora, Rachel, and Maybelle weren't waiting to be rescued. They were making one last gamble. A letter sent back east. 3 replies. 3 strangers. They didn't come for love. They came for a piece of land and a promise. What the sisters didn't know was that one would betray them, and one would stand when no one else did. The morning they arrived, the sky over Willow Creek was the color of hammered tin, and the wind smelled of dust and distant trouble. Cora Langston stood on the porch, arms crossed, jaw tight. Beside her, Rachel leaned against a post, one hand resting near the revolver holstered low on her hip. Mabel stood a step behind them, clutching her shawl like a prayer. 3 riders crested the ridge just after sunup. Their silhouettes shimmered in the heat rising off the land. 3 shapes carved against a sky too wide to forgive mistakes. None of the sisters spoke as the men drew closer. The first rider wore a fine coat, too clean for someone claiming to work cattle. He rode tall, hat tipped back, a smile already tugging at his lips. His horse was sleek and dark, with silver tack that caught the light like a promise you couldn't quite trust. The second slouched in his saddle, cigarette hanging lazy from his mouth. His boots were scuffed to ruin, and his horse looked near starved. There was a twitch to him, a looseness in the shoulders that put Rachel's nerves on edge. The third rode a pace behind. He didn't slouch or smile, just kept his eyes ahead, reins loose in his calloused hands. His gear was plain but solid, his clothes worn but cared for. He carried himself with the quiet of a man who'd seen too much and bragged about none of it. They reined in and dismounted slow, dust puffing up around their boots. "Cora Langston?" the first one asked, doffing his hat with a little flair. "Name's Boone Reich. This here's Clay Maddox, and the quiet fella's Joseph Cole." Cora nodded once. "You came about the ad." "We did," Boone said, grinning, "and from the looks of things, just in time." Rachel's gaze sharpened. "We don't need saving." "No offense meant," Boone said, hands up. "Just figured you might want a few extra hands around the place. Ranching's tough for anyone. Tougher still when it's 3 ladies running the whole spread." "We manage," Cora said. "Barely," Rachel muttered. Mabel didn't say anything. She just stared at the quiet one, Joseph, who stood a little apart from the other 2, hat in hand, watching the ranch with a gaze that seemed to weigh the broken fences, the sagging roof, and the sisters themselves with equal care. "Well," Cora said, forcing her voice steady, "we've got spare bunks in the old bunkhouse. You'll earn your keep if you stay. We're not offering charity or promises, just work." "Understood," Clay drawled, flicking ash to the dirt. "We didn't come looking for anything free." "Good," Cora said. "Rachel'll show you to the barn. Stow your gear and get washed up. Work starts at dawn." They turned to follow. Boone gave a long look at the porch before heading off. "Mighty fine setup you've got here," he said over his shoulder, smiling like he owned the place already. Cora didn't answer. She waited until all 3 men were out of earshot before speaking. "I don't trust him," Rachel said flatly. "Which one?" "All of them." Mabel shifted her shawl tighter. "The quiet one's different." "Maybe," Rachel said, "but wolves don't always growl." By evening, the men had eaten at their table. Boone told stories that made Maybelle laugh politely and made Cora's skin crawl. Clay drank slow from a flask he hadn't bothered to hide. Joseph sat near the end of the table, eating quietly, offering to clear the dishes when the meal was done. "He don't talk much," Boone joked, clapping him on the back. "Don't take it personal." Joseph didn't react. He just stood, gathered the plates, and moved to the wash basin like he'd done it 100 times before. Later, the men turned in. The bunkhouse light flickered out beneath the stars. In the main house, the sisters sat by the hearth. "They're not what I expected," Mabel said softly. "They never are," Rachel replied. Cora said nothing. She watched the fire burn low, watched the shadows stretch long across the floor, and listened to the wind whistle through the gaps in the window frame. Something about it all felt off, not loud, not wrong, just waiting. The next few days passed in a rhythm too fragile to last. The men worked, more or less. Boone rode out with Cora to check fences, filling the air with grand plans and louder laughter. Clay stayed closer to the house, always hovering just behind Mabel, offering to help with chores she didn't ask for. Joseph said little and did much. Cleaned the irrigation ditch, repaired a broken gate, replaced hinges without a word. But something about the way the wind moved through the grass felt different now. The land had grown uneasy. Cora noticed it first. The way Boone's eyes wandered when he thought she wasn't looking. The way he touched her back to steady her when crossing the cattle guard, hand lingering just too long. His words were polished, but his gaze always felt like a knife sliding between ribs. She kept her distance, but distance only works when the other person respects it. He didn't. Rachel kept a closer eye on Clay. She'd seen men like him before, slow-moving, too relaxed, like a rattlesnake stretched out in the sun. He never raised his voice, but there was an edge in the way he looked at Maybelle, like he was waiting for something soft to snap. One afternoon, Rachel caught him watching Maybelle feed the chickens, his expression unreadable. When he noticed her looking, he smiled wide and winked. Rachel's hand twitched near her belt, where her revolver sat silent and sure. Mabel tried to act like nothing was wrong, but her smile thinned day by day. She stopped humming. Joseph remained an oddity. He didn't offer compliments, didn't linger. He worked hard, kept his hat in hand inside the house, and watched everything. Sometimes too much. Rachel caught him staring once. Not at her, but at the way Clay leaned too close to Maybelle, the way Boone talked over Cora at supper. His gaze wasn't hungry. It was calculating. She didn't trust him, not yet, but she trusted her gut, and her gut said he was watching for a reason. That Friday, the sky turned yellow with a storm that never came. The air was thick and tight, like a held breath. The sisters worked longer than usual, keeping busy because quiet had grown dangerous. After supper, Boone poured himself a drink, something he'd brought in a green bottle with no label, and stretched out in their father's chair like he belonged there. "This place needs a man's touch," he said, swirling the liquor in his glass. "Someone to take the reins? Run things proper." Cora didn't answer. She sat across from him, fingers laced tight in her lap. Rachel stood by the window, watching the sky grow darker. Mabel cleared dishes with careful hands. Clay leaned against the hearth, his mouth full of secrets. Only Joseph remained apart, seated on a stool in the corner, cleaning a bridle strap with quiet focus. Boone's voice cut through the room again. "I could make this ranch something, bring in new stock, dig a real well, build it into what it should be." Cora's voice came low. "We're not looking to give up our land." "You already did," he said, smile too sharp. "The second you wrote that letter." Silence fell like an axe. Clay chuckled, slow and lazy. "Ain't no shame in needing help, darlin'. Just means you know your limits." Mabel's hands shook as she stacked the last plate. Joseph stood, moved to help her, and that small gesture pulled every eye in the room. Boone's smile slipped. Joseph didn't speak, just carried a stack of dishes to the basin and began washing. Cora stood. "It's late. Best we all turn in." She didn't wait for argument. The sisters retreated to the kitchen, hearts thudding in their ribs. In the dark behind them, Boone laughed soft. "Can't wait forever, Cora." She closed the door behind her, locked it. That night, the sisters sat on the floor of their shared room, whispering in tight voices. "I don't like the way they talk to us," Maybelle said, her voice a thread. "They don't think they're visitors anymore," Rachel said. "They think they've claimed something." "Joseph hasn't," Maybelle added quickly. Rachel shrugged. "Maybe, maybe not." Cora pressed her fingers to her temples. "We hold the line, no matter what." But inside she felt the ground shifting. Whatever safety they thought they'd bought with that letter, it was fraying at the seams. Outside, the wind picked up. The barn creaked. Somewhere a horse snorted, and in the bunkhouse a match flared. Boone lit a cigarette, staring into the dark with eyes that had stopped pretending to smile. Rachel Langston wasn't one for eavesdropping, but something about the way Clay and Boone slipped off after supper, heads close, voices hushed, set her teeth on edge. She waited a beat, then followed. Barefoot in the dark, she moved like a shadow past the side of the house and around the barn, where their voices leaked through the warped boards like smoke through cracks. "Easy pickings," Boone was saying, low and smug. 3 women, a dying ranch, no men, no law. We take it, we sell what's left, and we ride. Clay chuckled. And if they don't hand it over nice? A pause. Then Boone's voice again, colder this time. Then we make 'em wish they had. Rachel's stomach turned. Her fingers curled into fists at her sides, nails digging into her palms. She backed away slow, step by step, until she hit the corner of the house and slipped inside like a ghost. Cora and Maybelle were in the kitchen, preparing for morning. Bread dough rising in a bowl, coffee set to soak overnight. They're planning something, Rachel said, voice tight. Tonight, maybe tomorrow. They think they already own the place. Mabel's hands flew to her mouth. Dear Lord. Cora didn't speak. She just walked to the kitchen drawer, pulled out the small revolver their father had left behind, and checked the chamber. 3 rounds. Not much, but it would have to do. We keep doors locked, she said. No one goes anywhere alone. We wait and we watch. If Joseph's with them, we'll find out soon enough. That night, while the sisters huddled near the hearth, Joseph worked in the barn, mending a hinge on the tack cabinet. Rachel found him there, silent beneath the flickering lantern light. He didn't startle when she entered. Just stood, wiped his hands on a rag, and waited. They're planning to take the ranch, she said. I know. That stopped her. She studied him in the half-light. You heard them? Joseph nodded once. They talk like I ain't there. Like I don't count. Rachel narrowed her eyes. And what? You just stood there? Did nothing? I waited, he said, to see how far they go. Now I know. She didn't trust Easy, never had, but something in his voice was steady, honest, and in this house of lies that counted for something. You gonna help us? She asked. Joseph met her gaze, eyes like storm clouds. I am. It wasn't a vow. It wasn't dramatic, but it was true. By morning, the air had shifted. The horses stomped in their stalls. The chickens wouldn't settle. Even the wind had gone sharp. Joseph stayed near the house, chopping wood, watching for movement with a soldier's eye. Rachel walked the fence line, rifle slung across her back, nerves buzzing. Cora wrote letters in tight cursive, one to the bank, one to the sheriff, one she sealed and tucked into her boot in case things went badly. Mabel moved quieter than usual. She hummed again, but the sound was shaky. Her hands trembled while sweeping, while setting bread to rise. She didn't tell them about Clay brushing too close that morning, or the way Boone smiled at her like he'd already unwrapped her. She didn't have to. They saw it in her silence. That evening, Joseph joined the sisters at the kitchen table. He placed a worn satchel on the wood. What's that? Cora asked. Ammo, he said. Tools, rope, things we might need. Mabel looked down at the table, her voice small. You think they're coming tonight? Joseph nodded. Or soon. They're drunk on the idea already. Just need an excuse. Rachel glanced toward the windows, where the last of the light faded behind the hills. Then let's not give them one. That night, the sisters armed themselves as best they could. Cora kept the revolver at her hip. Rachel loaded the hunting rifle and placed it near the hearth. Mabel carried a kitchen knife in her apron, blade wrapped in cloth to hide the shake in her hand. Joseph checked the locks twice. Then he sat near the front door, one boot resting against the floorboard where it creaked loudest, just in case someone tried to slip through. The house held its breath, and then, just after midnight, the silence shattered. The front door slammed open, splinters flying. Boone stormed in, wild-eyed and grinning. Clay followed, shotgun in hand. Cora stood, gun raised. Don't! Boone laughed, stepping closer. You ain't gonna shoot me, sweetheart. But he didn't see Maybelle behind the door, clutching the heavy iron poker. She swung it hard. It connected with a sickening crack. Boone went down, howling. Clay raised the shotgun, but Joseph was already there, tackling him, the two of them crashing into the table, dishes exploding around them. Rachel fired once, missed, then closed in, dragging Clay's gun away and slamming it against the wall. Cora stood over Boone, gun shaking, breath ragged. Get out! Joseph pinned Clay, breathing hard. You heard her? Blood pooled beneath Boone's nose. Clay spat a curse, but neither man moved. "Next time," Rachel growled, "you won't walk away." The two men staggered out, wounded pride dripping behind them like oil. The sisters collapsed into chairs, trembling, adrenaline still singing in their veins. Joseph stood apart, quiet. "I should have said something sooner," he said. "I'm sorry." Cora looked at him, really looked at him, and gave the smallest nod. "You stayed," she said. "That's what matters." Outside, the wind rose again, but this time the house didn't flinch. The morning after Boone and Clay were driven out, the Langston Ranch stood still, like the world was waiting to see if it had really happened. The front door hung crooked on its hinges, splintered at the frame. The kitchen table was broken, one leg cracked in half from the scuffle. A trail of blood marked where Boone had stumbled out, nose crushed and pride shattered. But the sisters had stood. They had not broken. Cora woke before the sun and walked the fence line, revolver snug in her belt, coat pulled tight against the early cold. Every gust of wind made her scan the horizon. Every creak of wood turned her head. This wasn't fear. It was calculation, preparation. Inside, Rachel was already boiling water, sleeves rolled up, a hammer at her hip. "We fixed the door today," she said without looking up, "and then we reinforced the barn." Cora nodded. "And the bunkhouse stays locked. No more second chances." Maybelle moved quieter than usual, but her voice held steel. "We should send word. If they come back, we'll need help." Cora agreed, though the idea of asking for help still tasted bitter. "We can't ride into town ourselves, not without leaving the place open." Joseph, who had just stepped in from the barn, took off his hat and said, "I'll go." Rachel looked up. "You sure?" He nodded. "I know the blacksmith. He's got a long memory. So does old Tanner out by the river bend. Maybe even the Devises boys. They hate Boone more than they like us. But that's enough." Cora hesitated, not because she doubted Joseph's words, but because trusting anyone outside their walls had become a gamble they could barely afford. "You carry our name when you go," she said. "You remember that?" Joseph met her eyes steady. "I will." He left at dawn. The day stretched long in his absence. Rachel patched the broken door with a section of barnwood, driving each nail like she was driving a stake through every man who'd ever called her soft. Mabel boiled cloths, restocked cartridges, and checked and rechecked the food stores in the root cellar. Cora wrote out a list of defenses like a general before battle. Barrel placements, fallback spots, watch positions. Her handwriting was tight, her jaw tighter. In the evening, the sisters sat by the rebuilt table, supper cooling between them, untouched. Rachel finally broke the silence. "Think he'll come back?" Cora didn't answer right away. She looked at the empty chair Joseph had favored, then out the window toward the darkening horizon. "He's either with us," she said, "or he's not." Mabel stirred her stew quietly. "I think he is." None of them slept well that night, but the ranch stayed quiet. Joseph returned just before noon the next day, his horse streaked with sweat, his coat dusted in trail grime. He dropped a satchel on the kitchen table. Bullets, nails, extra rope. "They're coming," he said. "Tanner, the Davis boys. Blacksmith's bringing his tools and a shotgun longer than my arm." Cora felt something shift in her chest, something like hope, bruised but breathing. "Boone and Clay?" Rachel asked. "Still in town, getting loud, drinking hard. Won't be long before they move." "How long do we have?" 2 days, maybe 3. That night, preparations began in earnest. The sisters boarded windows, nailed shut doors they didn't need, moved livestock out to the far pasture. Joseph walked the perimeter, mapping the ground like he could feel the fight coming through the soil. Neighbors began trickling in. Tanner, white-haired but sharp-eyed, arrived with a mule cart full of tools and 3 homemade explosives. "In case they get clever," he said with a wink. The Davis boys brought rifles and fence wire. They spoke little, but their hands were steady, their eyes harder than most. The blacksmith came last. He didn't say a word, just rolled up his sleeves and started fortifying the porch posts like he'd built the place himself. Cora stood on the roof at sunset, hammer in hand, coat flapping in the wind. Joseph climbed up behind her. "You still don't say much," she said without turning. "I never needed to," he replied. She nodded, watching the orange light spill across the grasslands. This place means something to us. I know. Why help? She asked. Why stay? Joseph took a slow breath, the kind that comes from somewhere deep. Because this land's worth more than what men like Boone want from it. Because you didn't have to let me in. But you did. She looked at him then. Really looked. You got a place here, she said. His smile was quiet, but it reached his eyes, and he didn't argue. That night, Rachel kept watch with a rifle on her lap. Mabel curled up by the hearth, humming again, soft, shaky, but true. Cora spread out the map on the table, tracing the trails, the fences, the weak points. The Langston sisters weren't just defending their home now. They were drawing a line, and this time they weren't drawing it alone. Dawn came hard and gray, pressing low over Willow Creek like the sky itself was bracing for blood. Rachel was the first to see the dust trail. She stood at the ridgeline just after sunrise, rifle slung across her back, wind snapping at her braid. From that height, the prairie rolled wide and quiet, except for the smudge of movement on the horizon. Riders, maybe a dozen, kicking up earth as they came fast and without hesitation. She didn't move for a long moment, just watched. Then she turned and ran. By the time she reached the yard, the ranch was already alive. Tanner and the Davis boys gathered weapons, checked lines. The blacksmith hauled the last of the water barrels into place by the porch. Cora stood in the doorway, shotgun in her arms, eyes sharp. Mabel, pale but steady, tied up her hair in a tight knot and passed out bandages she'd rolled with shaking hands. Joseph finished hammering a final brace into the bunkhouse frame, then looked up as Rachel slid to a stop beside him. They're coming. He didn't ask how many, didn't flinch, just nodded, wiped his hands and grabbed his rifle. By mid-morning, the rumble had reached their bones. Boone rode at the head, face twisted into a mockery of his old grin. Clay was beside him, eyes glassy, a bottle still half-corked in one hand, and a shotgun slung across his lap. Behind them came others, drifters, hired guns, and men looking for a quick slice of someone else's life. They pulled up at the edge of the pasture. Boone stood in his stirrups, cupping his hands around his mouth. "Langston girls," he called, "come out and give us what's ours, and maybe we'll let this place stand." Cora stepped forward onto the porch, flanked by Rachel and Joseph. Her voice cut across the space, cold and clear. "This land was never yours." Boone's smile faded. "Last chance," he growled. Cora raised her shotgun and fired once into the air. A single sharp answer. Then everything broke loose. The first wave came fast. Guns barked, dust rose. Men whooped and shouted, trying to startle their way through the defenses. But the ranch didn't break. Tanner dropped the first rider with a clean shot to the chest. Rachel picked off a second, trying to circle the barn. The Davis boys worked like clockwork. Cover, fire, reload, repeat. Inside the house, Mabel kept low, tending to the wounded as they came. A young neighbor boy had caught a graze across the ribs, crying, wide-eyed but alive. She pressed cloth to his side and whispered the song their mother used to hum when thunder rolled through the valley. Joseph moved through the yard like a storm himself, fast, precise, tireless. He reloaded for the Davis boys, patched a barricade mid-gunfire, pulled a wounded man to safety without hesitation. He didn't shout orders. He didn't look back. He just moved forward. Cora held the porch, her shotgun kicked against her shoulder over and over, each shot buying time, each shot a statement. Rachel fought from the roofline. Her rifle cracked like lightning. She picked targets with cold efficiency, and when one man tried to sneak toward the livestock, she dropped him with a shot to the thigh. No mercy, but no waste. Clay tried to flank left, staggering toward the house with that same greasy smile on his face. "I came for the girl," he shouted, waving his shotgun like a drunk conductor. Joseph met him halfway. They didn't speak. Clay fired wide, drunken, shaking. Joseph didn't. His shot hit Clay square in the shoulder. The gun fell. Clay dropped to his knees, gasping. Joseph walked past him. Didn't finish him. Didn't need to. Boone roared in fury when he saw it. He charged the porch, horse foaming, revolver blazing. Rachel shouted something, too late. Cora stood her ground. Her first shot hit Boone's chest. Her second knocked him off his horse. The third, well, she didn't need it. He didn't get up. Silence returned in pieces. The attackers scattered. Those still standing rode off, bleeding and broken, dragging their wounded behind them. The ranch was scorched and battered. The fences were torn, the air thick with smoke and sweat and blood. But it had held. They had held. Rachel climbed down from the roof, hands black with powder. Mabel emerged from the house, eyes red but dry, fingers still stained with someone else's blood. Cora stood over Boone's body, chest rising and falling like a blacksmith's bellows. Joseph approached slowly, his rifle lowered. "You all right?" he asked. Cora didn't look at him right away. Then she nodded. "I am now." The blacksmith leaned on his shotgun, grinning. "Hell of a stand, Langston." Rachel looked around at the men, friends, neighbors, strangers who had chosen to show up. "We made a line," she said, "and they didn't cross it." That night the ranch was quiet again, but it wasn't the same quiet. It was the kind that came after battle, after something had broken and something else had been reforged in its place. The Langston sisters sat together on the porch, side by side. Joseph stood a few paces away, hat in hand, eyes searching the stars. Cora turned toward him. "You still planning to leave?" she asked. He shook his head slowly. "I've been running too long. Think I'd like to stop now." She didn't smile, but her voice softened. "Then stay." And with that one word, something shifted between them. Not loud, not sudden, but real. The days after the attack blurred together like rain on glass. The Langston Ranch bore its scars, splintered fence rails, burned earth where lantern oil had spilled, bullet holes in porch posts, and blood dried into the cracks of the yard. But it still stood, and so did the sisters. Rachel didn't speak much in those first days. She fixed what was broken with quiet fury, rebuilt the doorframe herself, replaced the shattered window panes with salvaged glass from the root cellar. Every hammer strike was a sentence she didn't say out loud. "You thought we'd fall." "We didn't." Mabel sang again, softly, shyly, as she swept out the front room or bandaged the blacksmith's shoulder. Her voice carried across the fields like smoke, light and persistent. Hope had taken root again in her chest, small and stubborn. Cora spent her time walking the boundaries, morning and night, boots pressing into dirt that had soaked her father's sweat and now some stranger's blood. The land hadn't changed, but she had. She no longer looked at it like something slipping through her fingers. Now it was something she had fought for, bled for, held. Joseph stayed. He asked for no thanks, made no speeches, just moved through the days like a man laying bricks where walls had once crumbled. He fixed the stable roof, dug a new line for the irrigation ditch. Quiet work, honest work. Cora watched him one evening from the porch, fingers curled around a cup of coffee gone cold. He didn't see her, didn't perform. He just wiped his brow and kept going. Rachel stepped out beside her. "You're gonna have to say it eventually." "Say what?" "That he belongs here." Cora didn't answer, but she didn't deny it either. A week passed, then another. No sign of Boone's men, no riders in the distance, just wind and grass and the steady groan of a place, learning how to breathe again. Neighbors still came by. Tanner with spare tools, the blacksmith with extra nails. Even the Davis boys dropped off a sack of oats without a word, just a nod. The sheriff showed up late, after it was done, as always. He walked through the yard, hat in hand, looking like he wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. Cora handed him a list of names. Injuries, dead men, witnesses. "You'll find Boone out by the east fence," she said, "under a stone with no name." The sheriff tipped his hat and said nothing more. One quiet evening, Joseph was out by the barn, nailing a cross beam into place, when Cora walked up. She carried a small bundle in her hands, her father's old work gloves, stitched and worn. "These were his," she said. Joseph paused. "You sure?" "I'm sure." He took them, slow and careful. "What do you want me to do with them?" "Wear 'em," Cora said. "There's still work to do." He smiled then, small, crooked, genuine. "You sure you want me staying?" She shrugged, but her eyes held steady. "We already built something. Would be a shame to tear it down now." Joseph nodded. "All right then." Later that night, the three sisters sat together in the living room, feet bare, the fire low. Mabel stitched up a tear in Rachel's shirt. Rachel cleaned a pocket knife in small, thoughtful motions. Cora watched the flames. "We could have died," Maybelle said, not in fear but awe. "Yeah," Rachel said, "but we didn't." "They'll come back someday," Maybelle murmured. "They always do," Cora replied, "but so will we." They sat there a while longer in the hush, surrounded by cracked floorboards and soot-stained walls. And something else, too. Something quieter, stronger, a beginning. At sunrise, Joseph saddled up and rode the southern trail with Rachel, checking the waterline. The breeze was cool, the sky a bright, endless blue. He looked over at her as they rode. "You ever think you'd end up like this?" Rachel laughed once, dry and low. "You mean armed to the teeth on a busted ranch with a man I barely trust, and my sister sleeping with a shotgun under her bed?" Joseph grinned. "Yeah, that." She thought for a moment. "It's better than I thought." They didn't say much after that. Didn't need to. A month later, Cora stood by the fence, overlooking the pasture where the calves kicked up dust. Joseph walked up behind her, holding a sack of nails in one hand, a hammer in the other. He nodded toward the field. "That gate still sags." "Then let's fix it," she said. Side by side, they went to work. Not with words, not with promises, but with hands and time, and the kind of trust that's earned when everything else is stripped away. The ranch still stood, and so did they. They fought for their land. They stood against betrayal. But in the end, was it survival or something more? Do you think Joseph truly earned their trust? Which sister's strength spoke to you most? Cora, Rachel, or Maybelle? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this story gripped you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more Wild West tales, where courage comes quietly and hits hard.